My name is Oswaldo Henriquez. My YouTube channel will be a platform in order to defend the Western civilization, the Judeo-Christian values, the capitalist system, in other words, the free market system, to defend the United States of America, and to defend Israel. In this YouTube channel, I will post many videos in defense of all these topics. Please support my channel. Thank you very much. Good morning. Today, May 28th, we're going to talk about the horrendous anti-Semitic and terrorist attack that happened against two young, beautiful Jewish individuals who used to work in the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. A horrendous anti-Semitic attack, a crime committed by a mixture of a psychopath, Nazi, Marxist radical individual. His name is Elias Rodriguez. The left and the radical left in the West and some individuals in the far right are making particular two excuses for what these horrendous anti-Semitic terrorist attacks happen. Many in the radical left and some leftist individuals say that this terrorist attack is connected to the Gaza war. That the Gaza war has become intolerable, unbearable. That as long Israel is keeping this war going on, the people will be outraged for what is happening in Gaza. Many are saying that Israel is committing a genocide, an ethnocleansing. All these propaganda lies that the radical left likes to sing like a mantra. And because the Gaza war is still going on, there are people that are on the edge that cannot control their emotions, and they are pretty much ready to commit this kind of horrendous anti-Semitic attacks. And as long as this war is keep going, there is a high probability that many of these terrible incidents can happen in the future. So we need to stop the Gaza war in order to low down the level of risk of out of control violence. That's one of the excuses that many of the left and the radical left and some individuals in the far right are explaining about this anti-Semitic terrorist attack that happened in Washington, D.C. on May 22nd. And other people, particularly in the radical left, and some stupid people in the far right, are saying something more with imagination, creativity about what happened, this anti-Semitic terrorist attack in Washington, D.C. They say that this was a false flag operation. In other words, a conspiracy theory. That this was a setup by some sinister dark force in order to give the perfect excuse to the US authorities to crack down the many radical Marxist, pro-Palestinian and pro-Hamas organizations that are popping up, particularly in many US universities. Well, the situation is more complex than that. That these two explanation or excuses for what happened on May 22nd against these two young Jewish individuals that were murdered by this psychopath anti-Semite. No, it's more profound. Actually, Elias Rodriguez is a product of two factors that are occurring right now. One is very important, is the corruption and radicalization of many Western universities around the world. In the US and Canada, in the United Kingdom, Australia, France. And by the way, it happened in my country years ago, uh, before the Civil War. So this is one of the factors. The second factor, this is a very important one. There is a large group of propaganda news outlets, particularly from the left, and some radical left influencers, and some leftist NGOs, and some stupid neo-Nazi right-wingers that are creating a tsunami, a huge tsunami of propaganda lies against Israel. And they are doing this in order to delegitimize, to demonize Israel, Zionism, and the Jewish people, and also the US. So this large group of so-called news outlets, NGOs, radical left influencers, are generating a toxic anti-Semitic atmosphere around the world, particularly in Anglo-Saxon countries, and particularly in countries that have substantial Muslim minorities, like Great Britain, France, Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium. So they are doing this, creating an anti-Semitic climate very similar, very toxic, that what happened in the 1930s in Nazi Germany against the German Jews. And probably worse because this is around the world. At that time, in the mid-30s, it was only Nazi Germany. So these are the two factors that create Elias Rodriguez, this psychopath anti-Semite terrorist from Chicago. Well, now we're going to talk about the first factor that influence or create Elias Rodriguez, this psychopath, Nazi, Marxist radical killer. The corruption and radicalization of many Western universities around the world, in the US, Canada, Britain, Australia. If the top Soviet leaders of the past were alive, like Nikita Khrushchev, Leonid Brezhnev, Andrei Gromyko, Alexei Kosygin, if those people were alive right now, they would be delightful to see how many middle class young people in the West, particular university graduates in the West, are committed to radical ideas, to Marxist ideas. And some of these middle class Western young individuals look like a jihadist, ready to tear down the Western civilization. But you know, the same top Soviet leaders, Khrushchev, Brezhnev, Kosygin, Gromyko, still were alive those top leaders will be pretty much angry, mad, because they will say to themselves, if they were alive, these top Soviet leaders, how much financial resources they waste, they waste, and build up those huge armies in the East in order to conquer the West. They will conclude, these top Soviet leaders, Khrushchev, Brezhnev, Gromyko, and Kosygin, if they were alive, those top Soviet, they will conclude, well, the only thing that we need to do in order to conquer the West was to send a couple of hundreds of radical Marxist professors to the most elite universities in the US and Britain and France. And then, voila, we turn a generation of radicals ready to transform the Western countries in proletarian and communist entities. Amazing. How corruption has penetrated many Western universities. But this phenomenon, this corruption, this radicalization of the Western universities, indoctrinating a generation of psychopaths, fanatics, dogmatics, zealots, sectarian individuals ready to commit violence for stupid ideological reasons, is not new. It has been occurring for many years and maybe many decades. The enlightened conservative American thinker and writer William F. Buckley Jr. saw this coming, this corruption, this radicalization, long time ago. In the late 40s, after the Second World was over, he wrote a book, How Yale, his alma mater, was becoming a socialist educational entity. Then, years later, in the 60s, William F. Buckley said something remarkable, reinforcing this knowledge that many Western universities, particularly in the US, were becoming corrupt and radical. He said in an interview that he would rather be governed by the 2,000 citizens of the Boston telephone book when we used to have telephone books. I am from the time of the telephone books. This big book when you can find anybody's telephone number. My two sons probably they don't know what is a telephone book. But he said that he would rather be governed by the 2,000 people of the Boston telephone book than rather than the 2,000 faculty members of Harvard. So this is not new. This radicalization of Western universities is happening from many long times ago, indoctrinating people. When I studied in Cincinnati, Ohio, early in the 19th, during the first Gulf War, I saw that radicalization. I went to a Catholic university in Cincinnati, Ohio, in the US. And in this university, already they have the university faculties, they have a Nazi Palestinian professor spreading propaganda lies against Israel. Even myself, I had a confrontation with a Marxist Marino nun that was spreading propaganda about the Salvadorian Civil War. She was saying to many Americans in one particular class that the Marxist guerrillas in my country were created by poor people, by peasants. And I said to her, no, That's a lie. Most of the Salvadorian Marxist guerrillas were created by upper and middle class individuals who were indoctrinated by elite Catholic schools and elite Catholic universities. And I said, you know why I know that? Because two of my uncles, who were second degree cousins of my mother's family side, were members of the largest Marxist guerrilla in El Salvador, the Popular Liberation Front, las FPL. So since I went to study in the US in the 1990s, this has been worsened, this radicalization. So many Western universities, by pursuing this indoctrination, this radicalization of students, are playing with fire, are playing a dangerous game. You know, I come from El Salvador, and El Salvador we had in the 80s a nasty civil war, bloody. And most of the Marxist guerrillas leaders were middle class and upper middle class individuals who were indoctrinated and radicalized in elite schools, Catholic schools, and elite Catholic universities. Because in the late 40s, particularly in the late 50s and early 60s of the last century, many elite Catholic education institutions were infiltrated by this Marxist movement and ideology, the liberation theology. The liberation theology was created by the Marxist and Communist bloc in order to undermine Western influence and try to turn the entire Latin American region in another Soviet communist bloc. So these infiltrated elite Catholic education institutions create a generation of Salvadorian psychopaths, fanatics, dogmatics, and radical individuals who were the main leaders of many of the Marxist Salvadorian guerrillas that during the Civil War destroyed the Salvadorian economy, the Salvadorian agriculture, and cost the life of 82,000 Salvadorian people who were killed during the Civil War. So the Western universities are playing a very dangerous game. Already happened an incident before this one, this anti-Semitic terrorist attack in Washington, D.C. on May 22nd against these two young Jewish people. In December of 2024, Louis Majoni, this upper middle class individual, commit a terrorist attack also because it was a political violence attack. He murdered in cold blood a healthcare executive. And Louis Majoni, like Elias Rodriguez, were university graduates. Louis Majoni graduated from UPenn, the same UPenn that was involved in anti-Semitic and radical controversies after the October 7th terrorist attack, because the UPenn was radicalizing and indoctrinating the students and allowing anti-Semitic attacks against UPenn Jewish students. And now these two individuals who commit this horrendous crime are the heroes of the radical left. So now we have talked about it. One of the factors the corruption and radicalization of Western universities that are indoctrinating people to turn to be radical fanatics and dogmatics. When you create a radical left individual, you are creating somebody who is extremely dogmatic. You cannot rationalize with radical left people. They are beyond uh, rationalization or conversation because these people are fanatics, dogmatic fanatics, sectarian, zealous. Now we're going to talk about the second factor that probably, or even I strongly believe, influence or create Elias Rodriguez to commit this anti-Semitic terrorist attack in Washington, D.C. On May 22nd. There is a tsunami of propaganda lies against Israel to try to delegitimize, dehumanize Israel and Zionism and the Jewish people. Particular, the Israel war efforts against Hamas and the Jihad Islamic in Gaza, accusing Israel of genocide, apartheid, Holocaust, and many evil crimes. Most of these tsunamis of propaganda lies against Israel is spread by the radical left. And many radical left so-called news outlets, leftist NGOs, and many so-called independent influencers in the left. But what is the radical left? Who defines the radical left? The radical left is saying for many people is the woke left, the progressives, the liberals. For me, the correct name of the radical left is the post-Soviet new Marxists or the post-Soviet new communists. Because many of the propaganda lies that the radical left are saying right now against Israel were used by the Soviet Union in the past. Like Israel is a racist society or racist country, something like that. But the radical left has a very simplistic approach of everything, very dialectic approach, like a Hollywood movie. You know, in many Hollywood movies, the underdog, the poor, the disadvantaged, the marginalized are the heroes of the movie, the good ones. By contrast, the powerful, the successful, the rich, most of the time are the bad ones. So the radical left has this approach, very simplistic approach, that is very easy to understand. And they approach the same Hollywood playbook with the Israel-Palestinian conflict. So the Palestinians, these poor angels, they are oppressed, they are occupied, they are an open-air prison, they are a concentration camp, they are a third world country, they are underdeveloped. They must automatically be the good ones, the Palestinians, for all these characteristics that are already described. But Israel, the oppressor, the occupier, this settled colonial project, they are powerful, they are wealthy, they are successful, they have a strong army and maybe a nuclear arsenal. They must be automatically evil, the good, not the good ones, but the bad ones. So they have this frame to put the Palestinian-Israel conflict. Very simplistic. But they are wrong. First of all, because the Palestinians in Gaza were not occupied, they were not oppressed. Mhm. The Palestinians in Gaza in 2005 were almost totally independent. They actually elect Hamas as the ruling party. And this party, Hamas and the Jihad Islamic, in 2007 decided to declare war against the Jewish state freely without any coercion. Hmm? So, obviously, Israel imposed a blockade to an enemy which declared war against Israel and the Jewish people in Israel. No, the Palestinians are the bad ones, even though they are underdeveloped, a third world country, and poor. And actually, the Palestinians are the 21st century Nazis. They have a genocide intention. And we saw that genocide intention on October 7 of 2023. They tried to destroy Israel and commit a genocide, but they failed because they were stopped at the first moment by normal Israeli citizens that have some military training. And then finally, the Israeli army repelled the Palestinian invader and brought the war to Gaza. But the Palestinians are the 21st century Nazis. They have the same intention that Nazi Germany. The problem is that they don't have the full resources, the full capacities, and the full skills in order to commit a full genocide, in order to finally destroy Israel and exterminate the Jewish people. They lack resources. They lack capabilities. By contrast, Nazi Germany was one of the most wealthy, high technology countries in the world in the 40s of the last century. And Nazi Germany conquered almost the entire European continent. And for many years, nobody could stop Nazi Germany for fulfill its genocide intentions. They actually were successful to commit genocide and kill 6 million Jews and many other minorities, by the way, gypsies and other people, Slavs. So that's the difference. Palestinians in Gaza are the new Nazis, but they lack resources and capabilities in order to fulfill the genocide intentions. They failed on October 7th, but they were ready to commit it. We saw it. So the Palestinians are the bad ones in this movie, even though they are poor, underdeveloped, and third world country. And the Israelis are the good ones. Hmm? Even though they are successful, powerful, and rich. You know, the radical left are spreading two important lies. There are many, but I'm going to focus on two. That the Palestinians in Gaza were oppressed, occupied. No, they are not. If there were occupation in Gaza, October 7 will never have occurred. You have to think in common sense, logical. These people were free. The people were not occupied. But we have to understand the Palestinian language. The Palestinian language, the entire Greater Israel, including 48 Israel, is occupied. So probably we misunderstood the Palestinians. But actually, in Gaza, they were not occupied. They were not oppressed. They were free to import brand new white Toyota pickup trucks in order to drive them inside Israel on October 7th and massacre people. They were free, Palestinians in Gaza, to manufacture thousands of rockets in order to launch them against Israeli cities. They were free to import thousands of AK 47 rifles in order to attack Israel and massacred people on October 7th. They were free, listen, to build hundreds of kilometers of tunnel underneath of Gaza. So they were free. And they, in 2007, the Palestinians in Gaza, they freely choose to go to war against Israel. And they freely choose to go all out war against Israel on October 7th of 2023 to try to destroy Israel and fulfill the Palestinian genocide intentions. So yes, the Palestinians were free. They were not occupied. They were not oppressed. Probably oppressed of this semi-theocratic tyranny by Hamas and the Jihad Islamic. But they were free to go to war against Israel. Nobody stopped them. So that's nonsense about the Palestinians are in concentration camp and an open air prison. So when you have seen in a concentration camp that has many hospitals, universities, even Al Jazeera at the beginning of the war said that Israel targeted a commercial building. I never seen a commercial building in the concentration camps that were created by Nazi Germany or by the Soviet Union in the gulags in Siberia. You see, the Palestinian movement is extremely dishonest. They are full of lies. That's the reason I don't support it. Mm. Now, they are accusing Israel of genocide. Well, that's a terrible number. They say that Israel has killed 53,000 civilians during the war in Gaza. A terrible number. No? Most of them women and children. The same song they like to sing like a mantra. The pro-Palestinian people and the radical left. So, who are you going to believe? A terrorist organization that kidnapped babies. Remember the Viva baby that was kidnapped on October 7th? Elderly people and Holocaust survivors. And during the captivity of those people that I mentioned, the Palestinians in Gaza, Hamas, killed them. So you are going to believe a terrorist organization that do that? You know, for these people, for the healthcare minister of Gaza that is controlled by Hamas, even Mohammed Def and Yahya Sinwar, the masterminders of the October 7th, are civilians. They never said in their statements about casualty numbers, well, Israel has killed 53,000 people, women and children, as the son said, and we have to subtract Mohammed Def plus Yahya Sinwar, and now Mohammed Sinwar, because they are combatants. So we have to take these three out of the casualty number. No, they never said that. For these people, for the radical left and the pro-Hamas people, and for the healthcare minister of Gaza, who is controlled by Hamas, even Mohammed Def, Yahya Sinwar, and Mohammed Sinwar probably are civilians. Now, the radical left and the pro-Hamas people don't believe the casualty numbers of Israel. A democratic, pluralistic, rule of law country that said that they has eliminated around 25,000 terrorists. You know, I'm going to tell you something many people probably don't know. But right now, the main leader of this country, of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, that, by the way, I have my mixed feelings about Netanyahu. Netanyahu right now, the prime minister of this country, is not only facing or heading the war effort in Gaza, but at the same time, Netanyahu is facing legal criminal charges against him in the Israel courts. Imagine Winston Churchill heading the war effort against Nazi Germany in the Second War, and at the same time, Churchill facing criminal charges against him in British courts. It would be unthinkable, but the unthinkable is happening in Israel. The prime minister of Israel that is heading the war effort against Hamas and the Jihad Islamic in Gaza is facing criminal charges in Israel. So who are you going to believe? A terrorist organization that kidnapped babies, elderly people, Holocaust survivors, where the top leaders of this terrorist organization has zero accountability with the Palestinian people. Those leaders of Hamas and Jihad Islamic, they see the Palestinian people as disposable tool in this stupid war. And those leaders live an ostentatious, luxurious life in Doha, Gaza. Doha, in Doha, Qatar. By contrast, the radical left don't believe the casualty numbers of Israel, a democratic, pluralistic state that the main leader is right now involved in a criminal procedure. Amazing. So, suppose we are a neutral person. We believe the casualty numbers of these terrorist organizations that kidnap babies, elderly people, and Holocaust survivors. And also believe the casualty numbers of Israel, a democratic, pluralistic, rule of law country. So, Israel has killed half of the numbers that the terrorist organization says that has died in this war. 53,000 people. Hmm? You know, many people forget that in wars, civilians get killed. Most of the time, civilians are the ones that pay the high price in wars. Even in the Falklands War, this war that happened in the beginning of the 80s of the last century, in these isolated islands in the southern part of the Atlantic Ocean, even in that isolated war, a couple of civilians were killed. Mm-hmm. So in every war, civilians get killed. And civilians are the ones that get killed more than combatants. You know, I saw recently that many of the terrorist officials or fighters got killed next to their families. For example, one individual, the spokesperson of the Jihad Islamic. There is a high probability that most of these terrorists don't go to hide under the tunnels. They go to hide in the safe zone among their relatives. So this individual was killed next to his entire family. Then was another Hamas official who was killed also next to his wife. So there is a high probability that most of these civilians that Israel killed by collateral damage are the relatives of these terrorists. Now, this accusation that Israel is committing genocide is very problematic. You know, there are some stupid individuals that said that Israel has dropped, it probably is true, the equivalence of 7 Hiroshima atomic bombs. The next question that one must ask is how many people died after the US dropped this atomic bomb in Hiroshima? The number is 1,000. No, sorry. The number is 140,000 people died in that atomic bomb. If we include Nagasaki, these two primitive atomic bombs that the US dropped against Japan cities in the Second War, the combined number is 246,000 individuals, civilians, were killed due to these two atomic bombs. So many people now they say that Israel has dropped the equivalent of 7 Hiroshima atomic bombs, and others are more exaggerated. They said that Israel has dropped the equivalent of 10 Hiroshima atomic bombs. So if Henry Hitler, the head of the Gestapo, the head of the SS, the second most important leader of the Nazi regime after Adolf Hitler, if Henry Hitler were alive, I can guarantee you that he will score a minus F to Israel for doing the worst genocide in the world history. No, Israel is not committing a genocide. I'm gonna present a video to show that Israel is not committing a genocide. But suppose we still believe that Israel is committing a genocide with 53,000 casualty numbers, and if we believe the casualty numbers of Israel, that is half of that number, 25,000. So we have to say that every single war that has occurred in the past is a genocide. For example, these people are putting the Hiroshima and Nagasaki case. Harry Truman, at that time, the US president, he didn't want the Japanese civilians to move from Hiroshima and Nagasaki. He dropped those bombs without any warning. Is Harry Truman a war criminal? Is the US a genocide country? By this standard, if we're going to measure Israel with one standard, we have to measure the other countries that has been involved in wars with the same standard. We cannot have different standards. With that standard, the US committed genocide. And in the case of Harry Truman, it's worse because Harry Truman was also involved in the Korean War. This war that lasts 3 years. And during 3 years, more than 2 million people died in that war. Is Harry Truman once again a war criminal? Is once again the US a genocide country? Now let's see another war that the US was involved, the Vietnam War. I believe that probably the US was involved 10 years in that war. And the casualty numbers are around 1 million or more that died during this war, that were killed during this Vietnam War. So if we have this analysis that Israel is committing a genocide with these low casualty numbers of people, 53,000, and we take in consideration that Israel is saying that they killed 25,000 terrorists, and we're still with this analysis, John F. Kennedy, Lyndon B. Johnson, and Richard M. Nixon, who were involved in the Vietnam War, are war criminals, genocide presidents. So we have to be careful how we use the word genocide. The pro-Palestinian people are using so often that this word is going to start to have no value at all. No, this is a nasty word. But you have to remember who started this war. Were the Palestinians in Gaza on October 7 of 2023. They started this war. Now, who are these radical left propaganda news outlets that are making this tsunami of propaganda against Israel? Who are these leftist influencers and leftist NGO that are creating this toxic anti-Semitic environment against Israel? Well, the most famous is Al Jazeera. Huh? Well, I don't know if Al Jazeera is a lefty organization, particularly because it's financed by Qatar. But most of their journalists are leftists. And then we have TRT, War, Middle East Eye, Democracy Now, Breaking Points, The Young Turks, Minority Report, Grey Sun, Useful Idiots, Secular Talk, and many others. Then we have the leftist NGOs. You know, many of these United Nations organizations are filled with radical left intellectuals. They have zero credibility. The leftist NGOs are Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch. Then we have many radical left influencers like Mehdi Hassan, Owen Jones, Josh Garroway, and many others. Well, now it's time to talk about the far right. The far right is also contributing to this second factor, this tsunami of propaganda lies against Israel, this toxic anti-Semitic environment that the radical left and the radical left propaganda news outlets, the radical left NGOs, and the radical left influencers, but also some individuals in the far right. And they are helping to spread this toxic anti-Semitic environment. But also the far right has a very simplistic approach, attacking Israel and the Jewish people. Probably more simplistic than the radical left. The right wingers, the far right, are only copy paste the protocols of the elders of Zion. And they copy paste this anti-Semitic book or anti-Semitic ideology that was written in the 19th centuries by a Russian anti-Semite that has this following interpretation, that this tiny minority of individuals, of people, the Jewish people, controls the financial world, therefore they control and manipulate Western governments. So the far right copy paste this ideology and they rebrand it in a new context, in a new reality, that Israel, this tiny, small Jewish country, with its lobby apparatus in the US and Britain, manipulates and controls the most powerful country in the world, the United States of America, and other powerful countries like the United Kingdom. And by doing this, by controlling the US government through lobbies, uh, the US is committed to fulfill Israeli agenda in the Middle East and around the world. So simplistic like that. So, um, who are these people in the far right who are promoting propaganda lies against Israel? Actually, these influencers, I don't believe any of them are journalists, are real crypto Nazis, anti Semites. And we have to call them out, to denounce them. The most famous is Tucker Carlson, then is Candace Owens. Ironically, Candace Owens, who is an Afro-American woman promoting anti-Semitic ideas, it's unbelievable. You know, the Nazi regime during the Munich Olympics in the 30s in Germany, they didn't like the Afro-American athletes at all. So the other people is Joe Rogan, David Smith, and Dan Bilzerian. And there are many more that are spreading lies against Israel. So you know, that's the two factors that are creating the perfect environment to commit anti-Semitic terrorist attacks, to commit tragedies like the one that happened on May 22nd in Washington, D.C. So, so, so now, what can we do about it? Well, I'm doing this video to denounce these people and these universities who are playing with fire. They're playing a very dangerous game. We have to boycott all these people and all these outlets. We have to stop supporting them and call them out for what they really are: anti-Semites and liars. So, why the left and some individuals in the far right in the West are pushing this massive propaganda lies against Israel, Zionism, and the Jewish people? The answer is very simple, and there are two factors. One is money. They are making a lot of money attacking and criticizing Israel. You know, there are millions, but millions of Jewish haters around the world. For example, the Arab Muslims, maybe 90% of the Arab Muslims are Jewish haters. They really hate Israel and the Jewish people. And they are consuming this anti-Semitic material, this propaganda lies. Many of the Western countries that have this problem of propaganda against Israel and pro-Palestinian protests are countries that have substantial Muslim minorities. I'm going to give you a couple examples. Canada. Canada has almost Canada has probably around 2 million Muslims. The US, the United States of America, around almost 5 million Muslims. Germany has almost 6 million Muslims. France has 7 million Muslims. The Netherlands has more than 1 million Muslims. Belgium has almost 1 million Muslims. Great Britain has around probably 4 million Muslims. Australia has almost 1 million Muslims. So those countries in the West have substantial Muslim minorities that are consuming this propaganda against Israel. Look, Latin America. We don't have that kind of problem. Most Latin American people are pro-Israel. And we don't have this kind of problem because we don't have substantial Muslim minorities in Latin America and any Latin American country. Even the Arabs descendants in Latin America, most of these people, they don't engage in this kind of problems because they are, most of them, Roman Catholic Christians, and most of them are upper middle class individuals. So this is a particular problem in Anglo-Saxon countries and in European countries that has substantial Muslim minorities. So many of these so-called professors in the West, so-called journalists in the West, so-called activists in the US, and many influencers in the West, they have been making a lot of money. Some of them write and sell books attacking Israel. Many of them are engaged in big conferences criticizing Israel. the vast majority of anti-Israeli influences in the West, they have YouTube channels or social media channels, and most of the time, 85% of the time, they spend criticizing Israel. I don't believe that they do it because they have a pathological problem with Israel or Zionism. They are making for money. And there is an extra bonus of that fuels this machinery of propaganda against Israel. And that's those countries who are putting money in this machinery. That's Qatar, particular. That's communist China, also Russia, and include Iran. They are buying influencers in the West, professors. Qatar, particular, buys entire faculty departments in many corrupt, radical Western universities, especially the social science departments. Qatar has its own propaganda news outlets like Al Jazeera, AJ Plus, and gives money to Middle East Eye, a propaganda news outlet in Great Britain, run by radical leftists. And Qatar also buys so-called professors in elite Western universities and many um, um, radical influencers in the US and Canada, in Great Britain. So they are putting a lot of money in this propaganda machinery. Then we have the ideological reasons. And in the case of the left, is different, a little bit different from the right wingers, the far right wingers, who are pushing this massive propaganda against Israel. And the left are going to explain in a following example. We have a very famous radical left Roman Catholic professor and priest in El Salvador, who, by the way, he is from Spain. He's one of the top liberation theology thinkers. As I said before in an explanation, the liberation theology was a Marxist movement that infiltrated the Roman Catholic in order to indoctrinate people in Latin America. It tried to turn Latin America in another Soviet communist bloc. So this Roman Catholic leftist priest, he's a Jesuit. His name is John Sobrino. He's very famous in Latin America. And in an interview, he gives the holy grail of the leftist ideology. He said in this interview, John Sobrino, there are two categories of people in the world: the oppressors and the oppressed. Simple like that. That's the way the left looks everything, like a Hollywood movie, as I said before in an explanation before this one. It's like the underdog, the unprivileged, the poor are the heroes of the movie. And the powerful, the successful, the privileged ones are the villains, the bad people. That's the way the left looks everything, in this dialectic Marxist way. And many journalists in the West has been educated in that kind of way of thinking. And this is the people that runs many of the big news outlets in the West. And so they are biased against Israel because Israel is powerful, successful, and rich. Hmm? And they have this new mutation, this new doctrine that comes from this holy grail, the oppressor and oppressed, that is the white European settler colony studies. Many people in the West, particularly radical leftists, they are pathological obsessed against Israel, believing that Israel is a white European settler entity that has to be dismantled. But they are not so obsessed about the entire Western Hemisphere. All American countries are white European settler entities. Guatemala, Mexico, United States of America, Canada, Argentina. And by the way, we have an exception in Americas. No? They are Afro black settled colonies or settled entities in the Caribbean, like Jamaica, Haiti, Trinidad and Tobago. But these people in the left are not so pathological sense to dismantle the entire Western Hemisphere. But that's the way the left looks everything, like this dialectic Marxist way. Then we have in the far right individuals. They are different. It's like a tradition. Um, Most of the people that I know who are far right individuals, they have a father or grandfather that was an anti-Semite. Mm. So it's like a tradition, a cultural tradition, a cultural family tradition that is passed to the new generation. This belief that this Jewish tiny minority controls the money, therefore controls the power. So that's the difference between the leftists and the far right winners. And the left is more like a dialectic Marxist way, and the far right is like a more family cultural tradition. Um, so that's the two reasons that the left and some far right individuals in the West are pushing this massive propaganda against Israel. The first one is money, and the second is like a combination of ideological reasons and a traditional cultural family reasons. Now I'm gonna talk about another kind of people who are extremely dangerous. These radical left individuals, these three people that I'm gonna mention, really are playing a very dangerous game. One of them is this young man. Is the same age than my younger son. His name is Gay Christensen. Uh, he's playing with fire, definitely. Then there is another person, a blonde, I will say a crypto-Nazi bimbo, Rebecca Jennings, is another danger individual who are inciting violence. These two individuals are inciting violence. There is another person that I don't know why this woman lives in the US. She's a Nazi, pro-Hamas terrorist woman. This Susan Abu Hawa. This woman should be expelled from the US. Send them to Gaza to see how she's doing with the violence there. If she can handle it. One thing is to talk about violence, another thing is actually involved in violence. Hmm? So these three individuals are extremely radical people. They are almost categorized as psychopaths. They are inciting violence. They want escalation of violence. They celebrate October 7th. They celebrate what happened on May 22nd in Washington, D.C., this anti-Semitic terrorist attack. And they celebrate that because they are fun as long the violence is one side. They're fun, they're okay. They don't bother if a family, entire families, were burned alive in a kibbutz in the southern part of Israel. No, they are fine. They're okay. They are fine and okay. A beautiful Israeli woman are killed in a Nova festival next to the Gaza border, and then their bodies being desecrated inside Gaza. They're okay. They're fine as long as the violence is one side. But sometimes one side violence can be fight back. They can be answered back. And many of these people probably expect that Israel will go to war shooting chocolates and flowers to Hamas and the Jihad Islamic and other terrorist organizations in Gaza. No. This is war. And war is a criminal endeavor. So now the Palestinian women and Palestinian children are being killed. That's not funny anymore. That's not okay. That's a war crime. That's a genocide. Uh, but when Israelis women and families and children were killed on October 7th, oh, that was okay. That was resistance. That's what fine. So these people are playing with fire and dangerous fire. Pretty dangerous game that Guy Christensen, Rebecca Janis, and Susan Abulhawa are playing. Escalating violence is not only one direction, it can be answered back. Yes, Guy Christensen probably will be fine to punch a Zionist in the face. And by the way, 85% of American Jews are Zionists. It's only a minority of anti-Zionist Jews that exist around the world, and many of them are in New York, and most of them are radical left individuals. For example, in Latin America, the number of Zionist Jews is higher, maybe 95%. I believe the problem of anti-Zionist Jews is in America, particularly in New York and probably Massachusetts. But these people want to kill Zionists because they believe that Zionists is a tiny minority of Jews and the rest of the Jews are anti-Zionists. No, it's totally contrary. The vast majority of Jews, probably 85%, are pro-Israel. And not only that, they are Christian Zionists. There are millions of them, more than Jews. And there are people like me. I am Roman Catholic Salvadorian. I pro-Israel, so therefore I Zionist because people who are pro-Zionist is in favor of a Jewish state. We don't deny a Palestinian state. Huh? As long as there is a Jewish state. So these three individuals, these radical leftists who are asking for violence, they believe that the violence can be monopolized. There can be one side. You know, these gay Christians, particular this guy, he's putting in danger his entire family. He believes that the crazy people is only in the radical left. There are crazy people in every part of the world, and not necessarily radical left. You know, after October 7th, there was a terrible uh, crime that happened in Chicago. A beautiful Palestinian child was killed by a Christian individual. Then, months later, three uh, Palestinian students were shot down by another Christian individual. So crazy people are all are spread in every part of the world. So don't believe that violence is monopolized by the radical left. But be careful, particularly you gay Christians. Now many people in social media know who is your father, who is your mother. Many people know where your mother works. Many people now in social media knows where you live in Ohio. So are you playing with fire? You are looking for escalation of violence. This escalation can overrun you. So one message to the U.S. authorities to investigate Gay Christensen, Rebecca Janes, and Susan Abulhawa for promoting and inciting violence. Because this kind of behavior can be out of control. And don't forget, violence is not always one side. It can be answered back. It can be fight back it can be out of control. It can turn out of control and can affect these three radical individuals. They are putting their personal physical integrity in danger by promoting violence. So I ask the US authorities to take care of these three radical individuals in order to prevent tragic situations like the one happened in December of 2024 in New York against a healthcare executive, and like the one that happened on May 22nd in Washington, D.C. So thank you for watching my video. I excuse my English pronunciation. You know, my two sons are my worst critics about my accent, but thank you for supporting my English. Support my channel. I will be keep uploading more videos about these issues. And thank you very much for watching my program. Bye.